Hi and welcome. My name's Campbell and this is Breath Body Therapy. Today I'm going to take you through a really short but effective routine to mobilize the rib cage, the diaphragm, and to really get the physical body ready for a breath practice. Unless you prioritize moving your thoracic spine, your rib cage, mobilizing your diaphragm, then quite often these structures and these tissues can become a little bit tight. Particularly if you work a desk job, okay, sitting at a desk, we sort of come into this rounded position. But even if you don't, we spend so much time closing down the chest, limiting that rotation of our thoracic spine. If you drive a car, read a book, eat food on your phone, a lot of these activities encourage the same position. And the more mobile your rib cage, the less effort you have to use to take beautiful big breaths. And so for me, one of the really lovely components or part of the magic of breath work is when we can keep the body relatively relaxed and soft, but use the breath with active sort of intensity. Now we don't necessarily want to be using the body to taking these big breaths because there's lots of association with that. We're creating tension in the body. This unnecessary effort has a sort of flow-on effect. So the more mobile the rib cage, the more mobile and active your diaphragm, the less effort you have to use to get yourself to the state that you're looking for. And so what we're going to do is just a very, very simple but effective way to open up the thoracic spine, the rib cage, and really to allow this expansion of the rib cage, which then allows the movement of the lungs and the shift in the pressure of the air. So one thing that I think a lot of people don't recognize is the way we breathe. Right? Now, we often think our lungs do the breathing, and really the lungs are just these big passive balloons. Right? The movement of breath comes down to pressure. Right? There is atmospheric pressure surrounding us, and there's this intrathoracic pressure inside our body. And the difference in that pressure dictates whether air moves in or air moves out. So real simple, if we think about the diaphragm shaped a bit like a parachute, when it contracts, it moves down and the rib cage expands. Okay, we've created a drop in pressure because there's a bit more space and the air comes in. That's our inhale. When we exhale, the diaphragm pushes up and the rib cage compresses, and that increases the pressure and pushes the air out, being our exhale. And so the better we can get at creating that space, creating that movement, the easier our breath becomes. And so we're going to start with the diaphragm. Okay, using the fingers just coming onto the sternum, we're going to walk the fingers down until we feel that little springy point just at the base of the sternum. Okay, this is the point where the two halves of the rib cage meet. So see if you can use your fingers and just gently try and find the border of your rib cage. Okay, we can walk the fingers all the way down until we feel the floating ribs sort of jutted out by themselves. And then again, we can just walk the fingers back along that border, coming back to that midpoint. So this border of the rib cage is one of the attachments of the diaphragm. So what we're going to do, thinking about the diaphragm being shaped like a dome or a parachute, is we're going to try and come up and under the rib cage, that border of the rib cage, to try and give the diaphragm a little bit of a stretch. So thinking of up and under, and we're just going to gently apply a little bit of pressure, trying to come underneath the rib cage. Now, the vast majority of people will find this a little bit uncomfortable. If you do, it's a great indicator that your diaphragm is perhaps a little bit tight. All the more reason to do a practice like this. So my diaphragm's quite mobile. I can really get my hands up under there. But I practice this a lot. I would not expect you to try and do the same. You might be finding that you can just get the tip of the finger or the knuckle just around the corner, and that's fine. This is a great sort of 1 to 2 minute practice every day if you can. But just come along and maybe give it a little bit of a rub, a massage, really just trying to loosen the tissue, okay? Our tissue in our body is all of these sliding surfaces, and sometimes they can get a bit gripped, okay, or a bit stuck. So we wanted to get in and just restore some of those sliding surfaces. Diaphragm, a little bit of a massage. Now, we've sort of woken up that area of the body. Let's see if we can take a few breaths now and just feel whether that breath moves a little bit lower. So just place the hands over the lower part of the rib cage, fingers facing into the belly button. We're going to gently exhale and push the hands together. Now hold that for a moment and then just try and breathe into your hands. As you exhale, push the hands together. And as you inhale, try and breathe into the hands. So that movement is the diaphragm. That's how we should be taking our breaths. Now, after the diaphragm, we also want to address the rib cage, okay? Our rib cage actually should be this mobile, moving structure that expands and contracts, but again, based on position, posture, habit, okay, the rib cage can become a little bit stuck. And then I'm trapped either taking shallow breaths or I'm having to breathe vertically where I just move the whole rib cage up and down. Not ideal. These accessory muscles around the neck, okay, not designed to be breathing for long term. And the more we do that, the more problems we find. So just think about using the web space between thumb and finger. We're going to come down onto the lower part of the ribs, okay? Now, we've got two sides of one rib cage. When I compress one side, I'm going to open the opposite, okay? So we can use a little bit of pressure with that hand. I'm going to push from right to left and I'm going to try and hinge over that rib. Okay, and then coming back on the same on the other side, I'm going to push from left to right and I'm going to try and open the opposite side, really trying to hinge over the hand, creating a little bit of a fulcrum. And I'm just moving the hands up towards the armpits, opening and closing. Now, if you find that's a bit uncomfortable, you can also just use the heel of your palm. But really try and explore, is there anywhere that doesn't feel like it moves as well as the rest? So again, this is a bit of a self-massage, a self-mobilization. Don't be afraid to get your hands onto your body and increase that sensory input and increase the mobility. So again, about a minute is great just to get the rib cage moving. And then finally, we're going to add a little bit of rotation. Okay, so placing hands on the knees. Imagine you've got a little dot right in the center of your chest. And to start with, we're going to just see if we can draw a few circles. Now what we want to try and do is make that circle a little bit bigger with each round. Now, importantly, I'm not letting the pelvis lift. Okay, so the pelvis stays grounded and I'm just trying to move the chest and the rib cage, imagining that circle growing larger and larger until you're really just drawing the biggest circle that you can without letting the hips come off the ground. And we can start to draw that circle back in the other direction. And again, I'm just looking for any little parts of this movement that maybe don't feel as good as the rest. And what I love to do at the end of about a minute is just close the eyes and maybe start to follow the body. Forget about the circles. Just start to move in any way that maybe feels right or necessary. So we can get the shoulders involved, we can get the head moving. Just lose your sense of right or wrong position and just move. Sometimes you'll hear some little clicks and pops or cracks, and that's fine. Don't push into any pain, but just try and find where in your rib cage isn't moving like the rest. And then we'll just slowly find our way back to that midpoint. Now again, let's take a few breaths just to compare. So we're going to start that breath down in the belly, feel it expand, and then just imagine as we breathe in, we really begin to try and take up the space. Okay, let the rib cage expand, let the chest start to push forward, and let your spine push backwards as well. Okay, we don't just breathe up and down or just to the front, we actually breathe in a cylinder. So we want to imagine the belly, the rib cage even pushing backwards. Imagine that cylinder is just opening up with air as you breathe in. So you can place hands on the ribs And again, imagine starting the breath with the diaphragm. We're going to breathe out and close down that space. And then a slow breath into the belly. And then keep the breath going. And as we exhale, start to just close down the ribs. And imagine how much space can I create on the inhale. And again, on the exhale. And a big breath in, belly, rib cage, chest. And feel it climb all the way up and then just let it go. So this is a lovely sort of movement routine to add to the start of any breathwork practice, but also just a daily check-in, okay? It's really important that your diaphragm is mobile, that your rib cage is mobile, so that your breathing is not effortful, okay? Something you do 20, 25,000 times a day, you don't want to be using unnecessary effort, okay? And that can just come from a limitation of movement, that can come from bad patterns of breath, habits, postures. And so ensuring your diaphragm moves and your rib cage is mobile is the first step to taking easy, healthy breaths. Come back to this routine before you practice breath work. You can save this video. Please subscribe. I'll be sharing more videos on breath optimization. Thanks for joining.